I watched my parents beam with pride as they handed my sister Grace a check for $30,000, her final tuition payment for Northwestern University. When I asked about my own college fund, Dad barely looked up from his newspaper. "You don't have potential like Grace does," Mom said, adjusting my sister's graduation cap. "Community college is more your speed." That was 4 years ago. Today we're both graduating and I'm standing on this stage as valedictorian while my parents sit in the audience finally understanding what they threw away. 4 years earlier, during our senior year of high school, the acceptance letters arrived on the same April afternoon. Grace and I were twins born just 12 minutes apart, but you'd never know it from the way our parents treated us. She'd always been their shining star, the daughter who inherited Dad's artistic soul and Mom's refined sensibilities. I was the practical one, the problem solver, the daughter who helped with dinner, while Grace practiced piano. The doorbell rang at 3:15 that Tuesday, and the mail carrier handed over 2 thick envelopes. Grace squealed as she tore open her Northwestern acceptance packet, and within minutes our kitchen transformed into a celebration zone. Mom called her sister immediately. Dad opened a bottle of champagne he'd been saving, and they began planning a dinner party for that weekend. My envelope sat unopened on the counter for 20 minutes while they fussed over Grace's acceptance letter. When I finally opened it, I found my acceptance to State University, along with a merit scholarship covering 70% of tuition. I cleared my throat and announced my news to the room. "That's nice, sweetie," Mom said without looking up from Grace's course catalog. Dad nodded absently while calculating dormitory costs for Northwestern. Nobody asked about my scholarship amount or what I planned to study. The dinner party that Saturday confirmed everything I'd suspected about my place in this family. 30 relatives and family friends gathered to toast Grace's future as an art history major. Aunt Linda brought a graduation cake decorated with Northwestern's purple and white colors. Uncle Robert promised to introduce Grace to his colleague, who worked at the Chicago Art Institute. Cousin Beth offered to help Grace shop for her dorm room essentials. I spent the evening in the kitchen loading the dishwasher and refilling appetizer trays. When Great Aunt Margaret asked about my college plans, I mentioned State University and my scholarship. She congratulated me warmly, but her words got drowned out by Dad's toast to Grace's bright future in the cultural arts. Our Grace inherited my appreciation for beauty and sophistication, Dad announced, raising his glass. She's going to bring culture and refinement to everything she touches. I couldn't be prouder of her artistic temperament. Later that night, as we cleaned up the party remnants, I found the courage to ask the question that had been haunting me for months. What about my college fund? Mom stopped wiping the counter and exchanged a look with Dad. They'd had this conversation before I realized. They'd planned their response. "Honey, we've been saving for Grace's education since you girls were babies." Mom explained, her voice taking on that patient tone she used when explaining why I couldn't have something Grace had received. "Northwestern is extremely expensive, and frankly, we think Grace needs the investment more than you do." "What does that mean?" I pressed, though my stomach already knew the answer. Dad folded his arms and leaned against the refrigerator. "Grace has artistic potential that needs nurturing. She's sensitive, creative, refined. You're more like your mother's family, practical and hardworking. You'll figure out a way to make things work." The words hit me like cold water. My mother's family had worked in factories and farms, built their lives through determination and sweat. Dad's family had owned a small gallery and considered themselves cultured intellectuals, though they'd never been particularly successful financially. "I got a scholarship," I said quietly. "And that's wonderful," Mom replied. "See, you're already proving our point about being resourceful." I wanted to scream that resourcefulness shouldn't determine which daughter deserved family support, but Grace chose that moment to bounce into the kitchen, still glowing from her celebration. "Pamela isn't this exciting," she gushed, apparently oblivious to the tension in the room. "We're both going to college. Maybe we can visit each other on weekends. Northwestern's only 3 hours from State." "That would be nice," I managed, forcing a smile while my world tilted sideways. The following Monday, I met my best friend Sarah at our usual lunch table and told her everything. Sarah had watched our family dynamics for years, but even she looked shocked by the blatant inequality. "They're not paying anything for your education?" she asked, unwrapping her sandwich with more force than necessary. "Nothing. Grace gets the full family investment because she has artistic potential. I get to figure it out myself because I'm practical." Sarah shook her head in disbelief. "Your grades are better than Grace's. Your SAT scores were higher. You're class treasurer and captain of the debate team. How is that less potential?" I'd been asking myself the same questions for months. Grace maintained a B- average while I earned straight A's. She quit volleyball after 2 weeks because practice interfered with her social life while I'd been dedicated to debate team for 4 years. But somehow her supposed artistic sensibilities made her the worthy investment. That afternoon, I walked home to find Grace on the phone with Trevor, her boyfriend, talking about dorm room color schemes and sorority recruitment. She waved at me cheerfully while describing the shopping trip Mom had planned for her Northwestern essentials. I went to my room and stared at my state university acceptance letter. The merit scholarship would cover most of my tuition, but I'd still need to find money for books, housing, meals, and other expenses. I opened my laptop and began researching work-study programs and student employment opportunities. The breaking point came 3 weeks later when I discovered my parents had taken out a second mortgage on our house to afford Grace's Northwestern tuition. Dad was in his office going through financial paperwork when I knocked on his door to ask if he'd co-sign a small student loan to help cover my remaining costs. "We can't take on any more debt right now," he said, without looking up from the mortgage documents scattered across his desk. My eyes fell on the paperwork and I saw the loan amount, $45,000. They'd leveraged our family home to send Grace to her dream school, but wouldn't even co-sign a $3,000 loan for my education. "You borrowed $45,000 for Grace's college," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Dad finally looked up, his expression defensive. "That's different. Northwestern is an investment in Grace's future. She needs the right environment to flourish. And I need a co-signer for $3,000. "You'll find another way. You always do." I left his office with my acceptance letter clutched in my hand, finally understanding that I was truly on my own. My parents had made their choice about which daughter deserved their support, and no amount of academic achievement or responsible behavior would change their minds. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling and making a promise to myself. I would prove them wrong about my potential, not for their validation, but for my own self-respect. I would build a future so remarkable that their narrow vision would become irrelevant. I just had no idea how dramatically that promise would reshape all of our lives. Freshman year at State University began with a wake-up call that would have broken most 18-year-olds. I worked 3 jobs to keep myself afloat 20 hours weekly at the campus library, weekend shifts, catering university events, and evening tutoring sessions for struggling students. My days started at 6 in the morning and ended after midnight most nights. The library job paid minimum wage but offered a quiet environment for studying between reshelving books and helping students find research materials. Mrs. Patterson, the head librarian, took pity on my situation and often saved complex research tasks for my shifts, knowing I'd appreciate the intellectual challenge alongside the modest paycheck. Weekend catering was physically exhausting, but paid better than campus work. I spent Saturdays and Sundays serving at faculty dinner parties, alumni events, and student organization banquets. The irony wasn't lost on me that I often served food to students whose parents paid their full tuition without blinking. Tutoring became my most valuable source of income. Word spread quickly that I could explain complex chemistry and mathematics concepts in ways that made sense to struggling students. Within 2 months, I had a steady client base willing to pay $15 per hour for sessions that often determined whether they'd pass their courses. My daily routine was relentless. I'd wake at 6, grab a granola bar and instant coffee, then head to my 8 o'clock organic chemistry lecture. Between classes, I worked at the library, helping graduate students navigate research databases while simultaneously reviewing my own course materials. Lunch was usually a peanut butter sandwich eaten while walking between buildings. Afternoons were dedicated to my most challenging courses. Chemistry lab sessions often ran over their scheduled time, leaving me rushing to my evening tutoring appointments. I'd meet students in the library study rooms walking them through calculus problems or explaining molecular bonding theory while my own stomach growled from missed dinner. My dorm room reflected my financial reality. While my roommate Jessica decorated with expensive bedding and matching furniture, her parents had purchased my side, featured hand-me-down basics and textbooks borrowed from the library whenever possible. Jessica meant well, but her casual mentions of spring break trips and weekend shopping excursions highlighted our vastly different circumstances. "Want to grab dinner at that new Italian place downtown?" Jessica would ask, not realizing that a $25 meal represented hours of library work for me. "I've got tutoring tonight," became my standard response to most social invitations. Despite the exhaustion, I excelled academically. My professors noticed my dedication and began recommending me for additional opportunities. Dr. Martinez, my organic chemistry instructor, approached me after class one October afternoon with an offer that would change everything. "Pamela, your lab reports are exceptional," he said, reviewing my latest assignment. "Have you considered undergraduate research opportunities?" Research positions typically went to students with more flexibility in their schedules, but Dr. Martinez saw potential that others had missed. He offered me a spot in his laboratory investigating new compounds for pharmaceutical applications, with a small stipend that would allow me to reduce my library hours. The research work fascinated me in ways I hadn't anticipated. Chemistry had always been my strongest subject, but working alongside graduate students and contributing to actual scientific discoveries awakened a passion I didn't know existed. I spent extra hours in the lab, not because I had to, but because I couldn't tear myself away from the experiments. Meanwhile, Grace's weekly phone calls painted a very different picture of college life. She described sorority recruitment events, art history field trips to Chicago museums, and the charming coffee shops near Northwestern's campus. Her biggest concern seemed to be choosing between 3 different winter formal dresses. "College is so much harder than high school," she'd complain during our Sunday conversations. "My art history professor expects us to remember like 50 different paintings for each exam." I'd listen to her struggles with reading assignments and paper deadlines while mentally calculating how many tutoring sessions I'd need to afford next semester's textbooks. Grace's challenges were real to her, but they existed within a safety net I'd never experienced. Our parents called Grace twice weekly and sent monthly care packages filled with her favorite snacks, cozy blankets, and spending money. They remembered my birthday 3 weeks late and asked generic questions about my classes when Grace handed them the phone during family calls. The breaking point of that first semester came in November when I had to choose between buying required textbooks for my advanced chemistry course or having enough money for food and laundry for the rest of the month. I stood in the campus bookstore calculating the cost of 3 textbooks against my remaining budget when I realized I couldn't afford both necessities. I called home that evening hoping my parents might send a small loan to cover the textbook costs. Mom answered with her usual cheerful greeting, asking how classes were going. "I'm doing well academically, but I need help with textbook costs." I explained, trying to keep the desperation out of my voice. "Oh, honey, that's tough," she replied sympathetically. "Have you checked if the library has copies you can borrow?" "They only have 2 copies for a class of 60 students. I really need my own copy to keep up with assignments." "I'm sure you'll figure something out. You're so resourceful." That word again, resourceful. The family code for your problems are your own to solve. I hung up the phone and made a decision that would define my college experience. I found the 3 most expensive textbooks on the used market, bought them with money I'd budgeted for meals, and started a freelance tutoring business to cover my basic needs. If my family wouldn't invest in my education, I'd invest in myself. Within 2 weeks, I had 12 regular tutoring clients and a waiting list of students who needed help. My reputation spread through word of mouth, and soon I was earning more than my library job paid. I discovered a natural talent for breaking down complex concepts and helping struggling students build confidence in challenging subjects. The financial pressure eased slightly, but the emotional distance from my family grew wider. When Grace visited my campus in December, she was horrified by my cramped dorm room and demanding schedule. "You work so much," she observed, watching me organize chemistry notes between tutoring appointments. "Don't you ever just have fun?" "I find chemistry fun," I replied, which made her laugh as if I'd told a joke. "No, I mean real fun. Parties, dating, social events." I wanted to explain that luxury required financial security I didn't possess, but Grace wouldn't understand. Her college experience included unlimited meal plans, spending money for entertainment, and parents who'd mortgaged their house to ensure her comfort. The semester ended with me making Dean's List while Grace struggled to maintain the minimum GPA required to keep her good standing at Northwestern. Our parents celebrated her passing grades as a significant achievement while treating my academic honors as expected performance. Christmas break brought the family dynamics into sharp focus. Grace received expensive clothing and jewelry reflecting her parents' pride in her growth at Northwestern. I received practical gifts acknowledging my responsible nature. The message was clear: Grace was becoming someone special while I was simply becoming more of what I'd always been. The final blow came during winter break when Grace called one evening crying about her failing grades in her major courses. She'd spent more time socializing than studying and was facing academic probation. "I need help with my art history papers," she sobbed into the phone. "Could you maybe write them for me? You're so good at research and writing." The request stunned me into silence. After months of working 3 jobs while she enjoyed the college experience our parents had funded, she wanted me to risk my own academic integrity to solve her problems. "Grace, I can't write your papers. That's cheating." "But I'll fail without help and Mom and Dad will be so disappointed." "Then maybe you should have studied instead of partying." "That's not fair. College is supposed to be about more than just academics. I'm developing as a person." I hung up the phone, realizing that my sister truly believed she deserved success without effort, while I was expected to earn everything through struggle. That night, I made another promise to myself I would never again sacrifice my integrity for someone who'd never sacrificed anything for me. Spring semester was approaching, and I was ready to prove that potential had nothing to do with family investment and everything to do with personal determination. Sophomore year arrived with new challenges and unexpected opportunities that would test everything I'd learned about perseverance. My tutoring business had grown beyond my wildest expectations, with students recommending my services to friends and classmates. I was earning enough to reduce my work-study hours and focus more energy on my advanced chemistry courses. Dr. Martinez invited me to continue research in his laboratory this time with a project investigating novel compounds that could potentially treat certain types of cancer. The work was complex and demanding, but every day in the lab felt like a privilege rather than an obligation. I was contributing to real science, not just memorizing facts for exams. Grace, meanwhile, had switched her major from art history to communications after nearly failing her art courses the previous spring. Our parents treated this change as a positive development, praising her flexibility and willingness to explore different academic paths. When I pointed out that switching majors would extend her graduation timeline and increase costs, Dad accused me of being jealous of Grace's intellectual curiosity. The contrast in our college experiences became even more stark when our parents announced they'd be visiting Grace at Northwestern for Parents' Weekend in October. They'd never visited my campus despite numerous invitations to see my research presentations and academic achievements. "Northwestern has such a beautiful campus," Mom explained over the phone, "and Grace has been wanting to show us her sorority house. You understand, don't you?" I understood perfectly. Grace's college experience was worth celebrating and documenting. Mine was something to be endured and eventually overcome. 3 weeks later, I received notification that I'd been selected to present my research findings at the state's undergraduate research symposium. It was a significant honor with only 20 students chosen from universities across the entire state. I called home immediately excited to share news that might finally earn some recognition. "That's wonderful, sweetie," Mom said, her voice distracted. Grace turned down the television. "Sorry, Pamela, Grace is showing us photos from her sorority formal. What were you saying about a presentation?" I explained the symposium, again emphasizing how competitive the selection process had been and what it meant for my future graduate school applications. "When is it?" Dad asked, taking over the conversation. "November 15th here on campus. It would mean a lot if you could come." "Oh, honey, that's the same weekend as Grace's sorority's charity auction. We already committed to attending. Maybe someone can record your presentation for us to watch later." The rejection shouldn't have surprised me, but it hit harder than usual. I'd spent months developing research that could potentially help cancer patients, earned recognition from professors and peers, and my parents couldn't reschedule a social event to acknowledge my achievement. "It's fine," I lied. "I understand." After hanging up, I sat in my dorm room staring at the symposium acceptance letter. My roommate, Jessica, had been replaced by a quieter student named Amy, who worked part-time to help with her expenses. She'd witnessed enough of my family phone calls to understand the situation. "Your parents are idiots," Amy said bluntly, not looking up from her economics textbook. "They're just focused on Grace right now." "They've been focused on Grace for 20 years. When is it your turn?" I didn't have an answer for that question. The research symposium turned out to be one of the most rewarding experiences of my college career. My presentation on potential cancer-fighting compounds received enthusiastic responses from professors and graduate students. Dr. Martinez introduced me to colleagues from other universities, several of whom suggested I apply to their graduate programs when the time came. During the reception following the presentations, I met Marcus Rodriguez, a chemistry student from the university's main campus, who'd also presented research findings. He was smart, funny, and genuinely interested in my work, rather than impressed by my circumstances. "Your compound synthesis approach is brilliant," he said, reviewing my research poster. "Have you considered pharmaceutical applications beyond cancer treatment?" We spent 2 hours discussing chemistry career goals and shared experiences navigating college as first-generation students from working-class families. Marcus understood the pressure to succeed without financial safety nets, and he appreciated the determination required to excel under those conditions. Meanwhile, Grace's phone calls became increasingly focused on her new boyfriend, Trevor, a junior from a wealthy Chicago family. Our parents were thrilled by this development, seeing potential for a good marriage that would secure Grace's future. Trevor's father owns 3 restaurants, Mom gushed during one of our family calls, and his mother volunteers with the symphony orchestra. They're exactly the kind of people Grace should be associating with. I wanted to ask why Grace's worth depended on her boyfriend's family wealth, but I'd learned that questioning family logic only led to lectures about my negative attitude. In November, I received news that my research had been accepted for publication in the university's undergraduate journal. It was another significant achievement that would strengthen my graduate school applications. I called home to share the news, hoping this tangible proof of my academic success might earn some recognition. "Published in a journal?" Dad repeated, sounding genuinely impressed for the first time. "Yes, it's unusual for undergraduate work to be published. Dr. Martinez says it's a strong indicator of research potential." "That's really something," Mom added. "We're proud of you." For a moment, I felt a glimmer of hope that my achievements might finally balance the attention Grace received. Then Grace grabbed the phone to announce that Trevor had invited her to spend Thanksgiving with his family at their house in Lake Forest. "His parents want to meet me," she squealed. "Trevor says his mom is already talking about planning formal dinner parties once we're engaged." Engaged. Grace was 20 years old and had been dating Trevor for 3 months, but our parents immediately shifted their focus to discussing potential wedding plans and the social advantages of marrying into Trevor's family. My journal publication was forgotten before the phone call ended. December brought another blow when I discovered that Grace had been taking credit for my tutoring business success. During a casual conversation with our cousin Beth, I learned that Grace had been telling family members she was helping her struggling sister by sending tutoring clients my way. "Grace is so generous," Beth said during our holiday gathering. "She told us how she's been networking at Northwestern to help you find students who need tutoring." I stared at Beth in disbelief. Grace had never sent me a single tutoring client. If anything, she'd discourage my focus on academics, suggesting I should spend more time developing social skills and seeking potential boyfriends. That evening, I confronted Grace about the lies she'd been spreading. "I never said I was sending you clients." Grace protested, her voice taking on the wounded tone she'd perfected since childhood. "I just mentioned that you tutor students. If people assumed I was helping, that's not my fault. You let them believe you were supporting my business when you've actually discouraged my academic focus. Why are you being so sensitive about this? It's not like it matters." "It matters because you're taking credit for my work while I'm taking responsibility for your problems." "What problems? I don't have problems." "Grace, you've changed majors twice and barely maintained passing grades. Meanwhile, I'm getting published and winning research awards. But somehow, you're the one who gets family support and credit for my achievements." Grace's expression hardened in a way I'd never seen before. "You know what your problem is, Pamela. You're jealous. You've always been jealous because I'm the daughter Mom and Dad are proud of. You can win all the awards you want, but you'll never be special, like me." Her words hit like physical blows, not because they were true, but because they revealed how completely Grace had internalized our parents' favoritism. She genuinely believed she was more deserving of love and support, regardless of effort or achievement. I walked away from that conversation knowing that my relationship with Grace had fundamentally changed. I could no longer pretend that our family dynamics might improve with time or maturity. Grace would always be the golden child, and I would always be the daughter expected to be grateful for scraps of attention. But I'd also realized something else during that confrontation. Grace's confidence came entirely from external validation, while mine was built on personal achievement. She needed constant praise and support to feel worthy, while I was learning to find satisfaction in my own growth and success. That night, I made a decision that would guide the rest of my college experience. I would stop seeking my family's approval and start building relationships with people who valued the qualities I'd developed through struggle. I would find my tribe among professors, fellow researchers, and students who understood that potential was proven through action, not inherited through favoritism. Spring semester was approaching, and I was ready to fully embrace the path I'd chosen for myself, regardless of who was watching or celebrating from the sidelines. Junior year marked a turning point where my hard work began attracting attention from beyond the university walls. My summer internship at Meridian Pharmaceuticals had led to breakthrough research on compounds that could potentially revolutionize cancer treatment. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the company's research director, had invited me to continue working on the project during the academic year through a prestigious remote research fellowship. The fellowship came with a stipend that finally gave me financial breathing room. I could reduce my tutoring hours and focus more energy on advanced coursework and research. For the first time since starting college, I felt like I was thriving rather than merely surviving. My work caught the attention of Dr. Sarah Kim, a renowned chemistry professor who'd recently joined our faculty after leaving a position at MIT. She invited me to join her new laboratory researching sustainable pharmaceutical manufacturing processes. Working with Dr. Kim was like having a master class in scientific methodology and professional development. "Pamela, your analytical thinking is exceptional," Dr. Kim told me during one of our weekly research meetings. "Have you given thought to your graduate school plans?" I had been thinking about graduate school constantly, but I'd been afraid to aim too high. "I'm interested in continuing pharmaceutical research, but I'm not sure where to apply." "With your research record and publications, you should be considering top-tier programs. Harvard, Yale, Stanford. Don't limit yourself based on perceived barriers." The idea of applying to elite graduate programs seemed almost absurd. Students from my background didn't typically attend Ivy League universities, but Dr. Kim insisted that my research accomplishments spoke louder than my family's financial circumstances. Meanwhile, Grace was struggling more than she'd admitted to our parents. She'd switched majors again this time from communications to psychology after realizing she had no clear career goals. Her grades remained mediocre despite the expensive tutoring our parents had hired to help her succeed. Marcus and I had been dating for 8 months, and our relationship had become a source of stability and joy that I'd never experienced before. He understood my dedication to research because he shared the same passion for chemistry. We studied together, celebrated each other's achievements, and supported each other through the inevitable challenges of demanding coursework. "You know what I love about you?" Marcus said one evening as we reviewed data from our respective research projects. "You've never had anything handed to you, but you've never become bitter about it. You just work harder and become better." His words meant more to me than any family praise ever could because they reflected genuine understanding of who I'd become through my struggles. In March, I received acceptance letters from Harvard, Yale, and Stanford's chemistry graduate programs, all offering full funding packages that included tuition stipends and research support. The offers were so generous that I'd actually be earning money while pursuing my doctorate. I called home to share the news, hoping that acceptance to prestigious graduate programs might finally earn the recognition I'd been seeking. "Harvard," Dad repeated, his voice filled with surprise. "You got accepted to Harvard?" "Yes, with full funding. They want me to work with Dr. Jennifer Walsh on pharmaceutical research. It's exactly what I've been working toward." "That's incredible," Mom said, and for a moment she sounded genuinely proud. "Harvard is so prestigious. How did you manage that?" "How did I manage that 3 years of working multiple jobs, maintaining perfect grades, conducting groundbreaking research, and earning recognition from professors and industry professionals? But I simply said, hard work and good mentors." Grace took the phone to offer congratulations, but I could hear the strain in her voice. My acceptance to Harvard highlighted the growing gap between our academic achievements in ways that couldn't be ignored or minimized. "Trevor and I are thinking about getting engaged soon," Grace said, changing the subject quickly. "His family has been hinting about it during our dinners together." Our parents immediately shifted focus to Grace's potential engagement, discussing wedding plans and the social advantages of joining Trevor's family. My Harvard acceptance became secondary news within minutes of Grace's relationship update. The pattern was so familiar that I almost laughed. Even acceptance to one of the world's most prestigious universities couldn't compete with Grace's romantic developments for our parents' attention. April brought another surprise when I was selected to present my research at the International Pharmaceutical Research Conference in Boston. The invitation came from Dr. Michael Chen, a Harvard professor who'd reviewed my published work and wanted me to share findings with leading researchers from around the world. The conference was unlike anything I'd experienced before. I found myself in conversations with scientists whose work I'd been studying for years, discussing research applications that could impact millions of patients worldwide. Several professors from different universities approached me after my presentation, expressing interest in working with me during my graduate studies. Dr. Elizabeth Foster, a pharmaceutical executive from Johnson & Johnson, handed me her business card after my presentation. "Your research approach is exactly what our industry needs," she said. "Have you considered industrial partnerships during your graduate work?" I returned from the conference feeling like I'd glimpsed my future in the scientific community. These were my people individuals who valued innovation dedication and intellectual curiosity above social connections or family wealth. Grace's life, meanwhile, had taken a different turn. Trevor had broken up with her after she failed 2 courses and was placed on academic probation. His family's interest in Grace had cooled considerably once her academic struggles became apparent. "I don't understand why Trevor's being so unreasonable," Grace complained during one of our family calls. "So what if I'm not great at psychology? I'm still the same person he fell in love with." Our parents rallied around Grace during this crisis, offering emotional support and blaming Trevor for not appreciating Grace's unique qualities. They arranged for additional tutoring and discussed the possibility of Grace switching majors again to find a better academic fit. In May, I received news that would change everything. Dr. Walsh from Harvard called personally to inform me that my research had attracted the attention of Dr. Robert Martinez, a Nobel Prize winner who was looking for exceptional doctoral students to join his laboratory. This is highly unusual, Dr. Walsh explained. Dr. Martinez rarely works with first-year graduate students, but your undergraduate research impressed him significantly. He'd like to meet with you when you visit campus this summer. Meeting with a Nobel laureate was an honor beyond anything I'd imagined possible. My undergraduate research, born from late nights in the laboratory while working multiple jobs, had somehow reached the attention of one of the world's most respected scientists. When I shared this news with my family, the response was muted. Grace was dealing with her academic probation crisis, and our parents were focused on helping her develop a new academic plan. My Nobel Prize connection was acknowledged briefly before the conversation returned to Grace's challenges. That evening, Marcus called to congratulate me on the Harvard opportunity. "You realize you're about to work with a Nobel winner, right?" "That's incredible beyond words." "I keep expecting someone to tell me there's been a mistake," I admitted. "There's no mistake. You've earned this through years of dedication and brilliant work. Your family might not understand what you've achieved, but the scientific community clearly recognizes your potential." His words resonated deeply because they reflected a truth I was finally accepting. My worth wasn't determined by family approval or recognition. It was demonstrated through achievements that spoke for themselves to people who understood their significance. As junior year ended, I felt ready to embrace the next phase of my journey. Harvard awaited, along with research opportunities that could impact countless lives. I'd built this future through determination, intelligence, and the support of mentors who'd invested in my potential. Grace would always be our parents' favorite daughter, but I was becoming something more valuable, a person who'd proven that potential isn't inherited, but developed through choices, effort, and the courage to persist when others doubt your worth. Senior year would be my final chapter at State University, and I intended to make it memorable for all the right reasons. Senior year began with a level of academic and professional recognition that exceeded my wildest dreams from freshman year. My research partnership with Dr. Martinez's team at Harvard had led to breakthrough discoveries in cancer treatment compounds, and our preliminary findings were generating excitement throughout the pharmaceutical industry. The work was challenging and demanding, but every day felt like a privilege. I'd spend mornings attending my final undergraduate courses, afternoons conducting research in Dr. Kim's laboratory, and evenings analyzing data for the Harvard collaboration through video conferences with graduate students and postdoctoral researchers. In September, I received notification that I'd been selected as the outstanding undergraduate researcher for the entire State University system. The award came with a $10,000 prize and recognition ceremony, attended by university presidents, state legislators, and prominent business leaders. Dr. Kim was thrilled by the recognition. "This award is given to one student among tens of thousands," she explained. "It's a testament to the exceptional quality of your work and dedication." The ceremony was scheduled for October, and I invited my parents to attend. They agreed to come, marking the first time they'd visited my campus for an academic achievement. I was cautiously optimistic that seeing the recognition firsthand might help them understand the significance of what I'd accomplished. Grace's situation, meanwhile, had stabilized somewhat. She'd switched her major to general studies, which allowed more flexibility in course selection and reduced the pressure of specialized requirements. She was still struggling academically, but the lower expectations meant she could maintain the minimum grades needed for graduation. "I'm just ready to be done with school," Grace confided during one of our phone calls. "College has been much harder than I expected. I'm looking forward to figuring out what comes next." Our parents continued to support Grace emotionally and financially through her challenges, treating her academic struggles as temporary setbacks rather than indicators of deeper issues. They hired additional tutors and arranged for reduced course loads to help her succeed. In November, I received news that would reshape my understanding of what was possible. My cancer research findings had caught the attention of pharmaceutical companies worldwide, and 3 different firms had approached the university about licensing agreements for potential drug development. Dr. Foster from Johnson & Johnson called me directly to discuss the commercial applications of my research. Pamela, your compound synthesis work could lead to breakthrough treatments within 5 to 7 years. We'd like to offer you a position in our research division upon completion of your graduate studies. The offer included a signing bonus equal to Grace's entire 4-year tuition at Northwestern, along with a starting salary that would provide financial security beyond anything I'd imagined possible. But more importantly, it represented validation that my work could genuinely impact patients' lives. When I shared this news with my family, their reaction was more enthusiastic than usual. The possibility of pharmaceutical industry success seemed to impress them in ways that academic achievements hadn't. A signing bonus. Dad asked, his voice reflecting new interest. How much are we talking about? Enough to pay for graduate school several times over, but Harvard's already providing full funding. So you'd have significant savings right from the start of your career, Mom pressed. Yes, but the real value is the research opportunities and potential to help develop life-saving treatments. For the first time, I sensed that my parents were beginning to understand that my academic focus might lead to financial success that surpassed their expectations. The prospect of pharmaceutical industry wealth seemed to command respect in ways that scientific achievement alone hadn't. December brought another surprise when Marcus proposed during our winter break. He designed the engagement ring himself, incorporating a molecular structure from our first chemistry lab experiment together. The proposal was thoughtful, romantic, and perfectly suited to our shared passion for scientific discovery. I want to build a life with someone who challenges me intellectually and supports my dreams, Marcus said, kneeling in the campus laboratory where we'd first met. You've shown me what's possible when someone refuses to accept limitations others place on them. Our engagement announcement generated excitement among professors and fellow students who'd watched our relationship develop. Dr. Kim offered to host an engagement party, and several faculty members volunteered to write recommendation letters for Marcus's graduate school applications. My parents' reaction was more complicated. They expressed happiness about my engagement, but their enthusiasm was tempered by concerns about timing and practical considerations. Are you sure you want to get married before finishing your education? Mom asked during our announcement call. We're planning to wait until after graduation. Marcus has been accepted to graduate programs near Harvard, so we can support each other through our doctoral studies. That sounds sensible, Dad agreed. You've always been practical about planning. Grace's response was warmer and more genuine than I'd expected. I'm happy for you, Pamela. Marcus seems perfect for you, and you both deserve happiness together. Her words touched me because they reflected the sister relationship I'd hoped we might someday develop. Despite our parents' favoritism and the competition it had created, Grace seemed capable of genuine happiness for my success. In January, I received a call from Dr. William Foster, the president of our university. He wanted to meet personally to discuss my achievements and their impact on the university's research reputation. Your work has brought significant attention to our chemistry program, President Foster explained during our meeting. We're receiving inquiries from prospective students who want to conduct similar research, and faculty candidates are expressing interest in joining our department. He offered me a position as undergraduate research coordinator, which would allow me to mentor other students while completing my final semester. The role included a substantial stipend and would look excellent on graduate school applications. You've demonstrated that our university can compete with any institution in terms of research excellence, President Foster continued. Your achievements prove that success depends on individual dedication rather than institutional prestige. His words resonated deeply because they validated my choice to attend State University, despite limited financial support. I'd built a remarkable undergraduate experience through determination and smart choices, not family wealth or elite school advantages. As spring semester began, I realized that my college experience was nearing a conclusion that none of us had anticipated 4 years earlier. I'd transformed from a daughter dismissed as having limited potential into a researcher whose work was attracting international attention. The recognition felt validating, but it also highlighted how dramatically my perspective had shifted. I no longer needed my parents' approval to feel successful because I'd built relationships with mentors and colleagues who understood and appreciated my contributions. Grace and I were both approaching graduation, but our paths couldn't have been more different. She was grateful to be finishing her degree and ready to move back home while figuring out her next steps. I was preparing to begin doctoral studies at one of the world's most prestigious universities while conducting research that could impact millions of lives. The contrast wasn't lost on our parents, who were finally beginning to understand that their assumptions about our respective potentials had been fundamentally flawed. They'd invested in the daughter they thought would succeed, while neglecting the one whose achievements would ultimately surpass their wildest expectations. Graduation was approaching, and with it a reckoning with 4 years of choices that had shaped all of our lives in ways none of us had anticipated when this journey began. Graduation week arrived with an energy that felt both celebratory and surreal. Grace and I were finishing our undergraduate degrees simultaneously, but our experiences couldn't have been more different. She was relieved to complete her general studies program with barely passing grades, while I was preparing to graduate summa cum laude with research achievements that had garnered national attention. Our parents arrived in town 3 days before the ceremony, staying at a hotel near campus. For the first time in 4 years, they seemed equally interested in both of our college experiences, though I suspected their newfound attention to my achievements was motivated by the pharmaceutical industry opportunities I described. The week began with a family dinner at Luigi's, an Italian restaurant downtown that had become popular with visiting families. Grace looked relaxed and happy, genuinely excited to be finished with her academic struggles. I felt a mixture of pride and anticipation, knowing that graduation would mark the beginning of my real scientific career. "I can't believe both of my daughters are graduating college," Mom said, raising her glass of wine. 4 years ago, this seemed like such an overwhelming challenge. Dad nodded, looking between Grace and me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You've both grown so much during these years." The conversation felt different from our usual family interactions. There was less automatic focus on Grace and more genuine interest in both of our experiences. I wondered if my parents were finally recognizing the inequality in their treatment, or if they were simply trying to rewrite history now that my success was undeniable. "Tell us about your graduate school plans," Dad asked, directing his attention to me. "Harvard's program begins in August. I'll be working with Dr. Martinez on cancer research, and Johnson & Johnson has already expressed interest in licensing some of my undergraduate findings." "That's remarkable," Mom replied, and she seemed to mean it. "We're so proud of what you've accomplished." Grace smiled genuinely at the praise I was receiving. "Pamela's research is going to help save lives. That's pretty amazing." Her words surprised me with their sincerity. Despite everything our parents had put us through, Grace seemed capable of celebrating my achievements without resentment. It gave me hope that we might eventually develop the sisterly relationship that had been sacrificed to our parents' favoritism. The next day brought a surprise visit from Marcus, who'd driven down from his university to spend graduation week with me. His presence added joy to what could have been an emotionally complicated time with my family. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson," Marcus said, shaking hands with my parents, "you must be incredibly proud of Pamela's achievements. Her research work is being discussed in graduate programs across the country." I watched my parents' faces as Marcus described the significance of my undergraduate accomplishments. They seemed impressed by his knowledge of pharmaceutical research and his obvious respect for my work. "We've always known Pamela was special," Dad replied, which made me wonder if he genuinely believed that revisionist history. That evening, our extended family gathered for a graduation barbecue at my parents' house. Aunts, uncles, and cousins who'd attended Grace's Northwestern celebration 4 years earlier now had the opportunity to learn about my academic achievements. Aunt Linda, who'd brought the Northwestern-themed cake years ago, approached me with genuine curiosity about my research. "Pamela, I had no idea you were working on cancer treatments. That must be incredibly fulfilling work." "It's been the most rewarding part of my college experience," I replied honestly. Uncle Robert, who'd promised to introduce Grace to Art World connections, asked detailed questions about my pharmaceutical industry opportunities. Companies are competing to hire you before you've even finished graduate school. That's extraordinary. Cousin Beth, who'd helped Grace plan her Northwestern dorm room, wanted to know about my Harvard plans. I've heard their chemistry program is among the best in the world. How does it feel to be accepted there? The attention was overwhelming and gratifying, but it also highlighted how little my extended family had known about my achievements over the past 4 years. They'd been updated regularly on Grace's college social life, but remained largely unaware of my academic success until this graduation celebration. During the barbecue, I overheard a conversation that revealed how much my parents' perspective had changed. Dr. Kim had called to congratulate them on my achievements, and they were discussing her comments with my grandparents. The professor said Pamela's undergraduate research is at the level of graduate student work, Dad explained. She described her as one of the most promising young scientists she's encountered in 20 years of teaching. "Why didn't you tell us about this earlier?" Grandma asked. "We would have loved to follow her progress." Mom's response was telling. "We didn't fully understand what she was accomplishing until recently. Her work seemed so technical and specialized." I realized that my parents hadn't been deliberately hiding my achievements from family members. They simply hadn't understood their significance enough to share them with pride. Grace's social successes and relationship developments had been easier for them to appreciate and discuss. Wednesday brought an unexpected call from President Foster's office. The university wanted to feature my research achievements in their graduation ceremony program, and they'd invited local media to interview me about undergraduate research opportunities. The interview went well, with reporters asking thoughtful questions about my research applications and future goals. When they asked about my undergraduate experience, I focused on the positive aspects: supportive professors, research opportunities, and the value of hard work. "Did you always plan to pursue pharmaceutical research?" one reporter asked. Chemistry became my passion through hands-on laboratory experience. I discovered that I loved the challenge of solving complex problems that could potentially help people. Thursday evening brought the most surprising development of graduation week. Grace and I were in my dorm room packing my remaining belongings when she brought up a conversation that had been weighing on her mind. "Pamela, I owe you an apology," she said, sitting on my bed while I organized research materials. "I've been thinking about how our parents treated us differently, and I realize I was part of the problem." I stopped packing and looked at her, surprised by the serious tone of her voice. "I knew they favored me," Grace continued. "I knew they spent more money on me and paid more attention to my activities. I told myself it was because I needed more support, but that wasn't fair to you." "Grace, you don't have to apologize for our parents' choices." "Yes, I do. I could have stood up for you more. I could have acknowledged your achievements instead of expecting them to be celebrated less than my mediocre accomplishments. I took advantage of their favoritism instead of questioning it." Her words meant more to me than years of parental approval could have. Grace was taking responsibility for her role in our family dynamics and recognizing the inequality I'd endured. "I'm proud of what you've accomplished," she added. "You've worked harder than anyone I know, and you deserve all the success that's coming your way." Friday morning brought final preparations for graduation. I tried on my cap and gown, thinking about how different this moment felt from my high school graduation 4 years earlier. Then I'd been uncertain about my future and hurt by my parents' lack of investment in my education. Now I was confident about my path and proud of what I'd built through determination and hard work. Marcus arrived early to help with last-minute preparations. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" he asked, adjusting my graduation cap. "I think so. It feels surreal that this chapter is ending." "It's not ending," he corrected. "It's the foundation for everything that comes next." That evening, my parents asked if they could take me to dinner alone without Grace and Marcus. We went to a quiet restaurant where we could talk without distractions. "Pamela, we need to have an honest conversation," Dad began once we'd ordered our meals. "We made mistakes in how we supported you and Grace during your college years." Mom nodded, looking uncomfortable but determined. We assumed Grace needed more help because she struggled academically, but we failed to recognize and celebrate your achievements. We're proud of both of you," Dad continued, "but we realize we didn't show you the same level of support and encouragement that we gave your sister." Their words were validating, but they came 4 years too late to change my college experience. Still, I appreciated their willingness to acknowledge what had happened. "I've learned to find validation through my work and the mentors who believed in me," I replied. "Your approval would have meant a lot earlier, but I've built confidence through other sources." "We want to do better going forward," Mom said. "We want to support your graduate school experience and celebrate your achievements properly." I nodded, grateful for their recognition, but uncertain whether our relationship could overcome 4 years of inequality and neglect. Time would tell whether their change in perspective was genuine and lasting. As we drove back to campus, I felt a complex mixture of emotions about graduation day. Tomorrow would mark not just the end of my undergraduate experience, but also the culmination of a journey that had transformed me from a dismissed daughter into a confident scientist ready to tackle the world's most challenging problems. Grace and I were both graduating, but we'd be walking across that stage as fundamentally different people than we'd been when this journey began. And our parents would finally understand what they'd failed to see for the past 4 years. Graduation morning dawned clear and bright with the kind of perfect weather that made everything feel possible. I woke early in my dorm room, taking a moment to appreciate this final morning in the space that had been my home for 4 transformative years. Soon I'd be packing these belongings for my move to Cambridge and the beginning of my doctoral studies at Harvard. Marcus arrived with coffee and breakfast, understanding that this day carried emotional weight beyond the typical graduation celebration. Grace stopped by to wish me luck, looking genuinely happy despite her own mixed feelings about finishing college. "Today's your day," Grace said, adjusting my graduation cap one final time. "You've earned every bit of recognition that's coming." The ceremony was scheduled for 10 in the morning in the university's largest auditorium. Families began arriving early to secure good seats, and I could see my parents, grandparents, and several relatives finding places in the middle section. Marcus sat with them, serving as a bridge between my family and my academic achievements. As graduates gathered in the staging area behind the auditorium, I felt a mixture of pride and nervousness that I hadn't expected. Professor Kim found me among the chemistry students and pulled me aside for a quick conversation. "Are you ready for this?" she asked, smiling warmly. "I think so. It still feels surreal. You've earned every honor that's coming today. I hope you understand the significance of what you've accomplished." The ceremony began with traditional pomp and circumstance, but I found myself paying closer attention than usual to the speeches about perseverance achievement and the diverse paths that had led students to this moment. President Foster's opening remarks seemed directed partly at my story, though he didn't mention specific students. "This graduating class represents the power of determination over circumstance," he said. "Among you are students who've overcome financial hardship, family challenges, and personal obstacles to achieve academic excellence. They prove that success comes not from advantages you're born with, but from choices you make every day." Grace received her diploma with polite applause, looking relieved and happy to have completed her degree. I was genuinely proud of her for finishing, despite her academic struggles, and I could see our parents cheering enthusiastically from the audience. As the ceremony progressed through different academic departments, the atmosphere grew more anticipatory. Special honors were announced for outstanding students in various fields, building toward the traditional climax of the Valedictorian recognition. When President Foster stepped back to the podium for the special awards portion of the ceremony, I felt my heart rate increase. I'd known since April that I'd been selected as valedictorian, but I'd kept this information private, wanting it to be a surprise for my family. "Ladies and gentlemen," President Foster announced, "it is my privilege to recognize this year's outstanding graduates who've brought special distinction to our university." He began with departmental honors recognizing students in business education and liberal arts. The chemistry department recognition was particularly generous, highlighting the research achievements that had elevated the program's national reputation. In the field of chemistry, President Foster continued, "We have a graduate whose undergraduate research has already attracted international attention and promises to impact pharmaceutical development for years to come." I saw my parents lean forward in their seats, beginning to understand that something significant was approaching. Our valedictorian represents the highest ideals of academic achievement, combining excellent scholarship with groundbreaking research that embodies our university's commitment to knowledge that serves society. The auditorium grew quiet as families and graduates focused their attention on the announcement they'd all been waiting for. It is my honor to call forward this year's valedictorian, summa cum laude graduate Pamela Thompson. The applause was immediate and thunderous, but I was focused on my parents' faces as I walked toward the podium. Mom's hand went to her mouth in shock, and Dad's expression showed complete amazement. They'd known I was an excellent student, but they clearly hadn't understood that I'd achieved the highest academic honor possible. Standing at the podium looking out at an audience of families and graduates, I felt a moment of pure triumph. 4 years earlier, my parents had dismissed my potential and refused to invest in my education. Now I was being recognized as the most accomplished student in my graduating class. Thank you. I began, my voice carrying clearly through the auditorium's sound system. 4 years ago, I arrived at this university with more questions than answers about my future. I knew I loved learning, but I wasn't sure how that passion might translate into a meaningful career. I spoke about the power of curiosity, the importance of finding mentors who believe in your potential, and the satisfaction that comes from working toward goals that extend beyond personal success. The research I've been privileged to conduct here has taught me that the most rewarding achievements are those that might help other people. Whether it's tutoring a fellow student through a difficult chemistry course or developing compounds that could treat diseases, the best work connects individual effort to collective benefit. I made brief eye contact with my parents, seeing tears in Mom's eyes and a mixture of pride and regret in Dad's expression. I'm grateful to professors who challenged me, classmates who supported me, and family members who believed in my potential, even when the path wasn't clear. This achievement belongs to all of the people who've invested in my growth and development. The final line of my speech was directed toward students who might be struggling with their own challenges. Success isn't determined by the advantages you start with, but by the choices you make when facing obstacles. Every setback is an opportunity to prove what you're capable of achieving. The applause was sustained and enthusiastic, but I was focused on my family's reaction. Grace was clapping enthusiastically, clearly proud of my achievement. My parents looked stunned, finally understanding the full scope of what I'd accomplished, despite their lack of support. After the ceremony, the receiving line felt like a celebration I'd never experienced before. Professors, fellow students, and family members offered congratulations that felt genuine and well-earned. Dr. Martinez called to congratulate me and discuss our upcoming work at Harvard. Johnson & Johnson's Dr. Foster sent flowers with a note about looking forward to future collaboration. But the most important conversation happened when my parents approached me after most of the crowd had dispersed. "Pamela?" Dad began, his voice thick with emotion. "We owe you an apology that's 4 years overdue." Mom was crying as she hugged me. "We were so wrong about your potential. We failed you as parents by not recognizing and supporting what you were capable of achieving. We assumed Grace needed more help because she struggled," Dad continued. "But we should have celebrated your achievements and invested in your success. We made terrible mistakes." Grace stood beside them, nodding in agreement. Pamela deserved better from all of us. I felt a complex mixture of emotions hearing these long overdue acknowledgments. Part of me was grateful for their recognition, but another part felt sad about the years of struggle and loneliness that could have been avoided with earlier support. "I appreciate you saying that," I replied honestly. It would have meant a lot to hear these words 4 years ago, but I've learned to find validation through my own achievements and the support of people who believed in me. "We want to do better going forward," Mom said. "We want to support your graduate school experience and be the parents you deserved all along." Marcus joined our conversation, having witnessed the family reconciliation from a respectful distance. "Pamela's taught me that potential isn't about where you start, but about how you respond to challenges. She's the strongest person I know." As we walked across campus toward the parking area, I reflected on how dramatically this day had exceeded every expectation I'd held 4 years earlier. I'd not only survived the financial and emotional challenges of funding my own education, but I'd thrived in ways that had attracted national attention and prestigious opportunities. The girl who'd been dismissed as having limited potential was now heading to Harvard to work with a Nobel Prize winner on research that could help save lives. The daughter whose parents had refused to co-sign a small student loan was now being recruited by pharmaceutical companies with signing bonuses larger than most people's annual salaries. But more importantly, I'd learned that worth isn't determined by family approval or recognition. It's proven through choices, effort, and the courage to persist when others doubt your capabilities. Grace and I took pictures together in our graduation caps and gowns, both of us genuinely happy, despite the very different paths that had led us to this moment. She'd learned that she was capable of completing college despite academic struggles, while I discovered that I could achieve excellence even without family support. Our parents had learned the hardest lesson of all, that their assumptions about our respective potentials had been fundamentally wrong, and that their favoritism had nearly cost them the relationship with the daughter whose achievements would ultimately bring the greatest pride. As we drove away from campus for the last time, Marcus asked about my feelings regarding this chapter of my life coming to an end. "I feel grateful," I said after thinking for a moment. "Grateful for the professors who believed in me, the opportunities I was given to prove myself, and even for the challenges that taught me how strong I could become." "No regrets about the way things happened with your family. I wish it had been different, but those struggles made me who I am. I learned to value achievement over approval, effort over entitlement and substance, over superficial recognition. Those lessons will serve me well at Harvard and beyond." 6 months later, I was settled into my doctoral program at Harvard, conducting research that was already generating excitement in the pharmaceutical industry. Marcus had enrolled in a chemistry program at MIT, and we were planning our wedding for the summer after my first year of graduate school. My parents kept their promise about doing better. They visited Cambridge to see my research laboratory, asked thoughtful questions about my work, and celebrated my achievements with the enthusiasm they'd previously reserved for Grace's social accomplishments. Grace had found her own path working for a nonprofit organization that helped first-generation college students navigate higher education challenges. She discovered that her own struggles with college had given her empathy and insight for helping others facing similar obstacles. The family dynamics that had caused so much pain during my undergraduate years had been transformed through honest acknowledgement of past mistakes and genuine commitment to healthier relationships going forward. But the most important transformation had happened within me. I'd learned that true potential isn't diminished by others' inability to see it, and that success, built through personal determination, is more satisfying than any achievement handed to you through privilege. My research was already showing promise for helping cancer patients. Marcus and I were building a partnership based on mutual respect and shared goals, and my family had finally learned to appreciate the daughter they'd nearly lost through their own short-sightedness. The girl who'd been told she lacked potential had become a woman whose potential seemed limitless, not because of family investment, but in spite of family neglect. And that made every achievement more meaningful, every opportunity more precious, and every day more filled with possibility than I'd ever imagined possible. Standing in my Harvard laboratory, working on research that could help save lives, I knew that the struggles of my undergraduate years had been worth every difficult moment. They'd taught me that the most rewarding victories are those you earn through refusing to accept others' limitations on your dreams. Have you ever had to prove your worth to people who underestimated your potential? Sometimes the greatest achievements come not from being handed opportunities, but from creating them. Despite the obstacles others place in your path, share your own story of overcoming doubt and proving your capabilities in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like this video to help others find inspiration in these words. Subscribe for more stories about resilience, family dynamics, and the power of determination to transform lives. And share this with someone who needs a reminder that their potential isn't defined by others' inability to see it. Thank you for joining me on this journey of discovery and growth. May you always find the courage to pursue your dreams, regardless of who believes in them.